So thank you all for being here. My name is CCP Old Boy, and with me here is my audio department, CCP Christian, and CCP Zoetrope, and somewhere around here, our producer, right there, CCP K1P1. So it's a small audio department. We are happy to be a small department because it gives us, we get to do many different things, and we learn a lot of new things, so it's a good thing. We also outsource some things that we don't have time to do, also to get new perspectives. But mostly, all of our work is done in-house by us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the philosophy and the practice of the sound in Eve, and talk about us a little bit, how we do it. So the first thing we have to do is we sort of have to, not be too scientific, because simply it's impossible, because we're in space and we have sound in space. So we have to forget about that. Of course, we had ideas of being more, more real, totally real, and having kind of no sound in space, but rather inside the ships. But since the game happens kind of outside the ship in third person, that's not possible. So maybe one day. So we have to completely forget about science here and just try to enjoy creating sound in space, which is fine with us. So I have this clip here, and imagine if this did not. Can you see it? No. Can you turn the light off? So imagine if this was silent. You still can't see it, can you? No. Anyway, it's a rogue drone harvest structure from last year. It's very nice, incredibly good-looking stuff from the graphics department. But having this totally silent would be, well, boring or not as exciting, at least. So that's just one example. We don't have enough time to play a lot of examples here. You can just go in the game and test it out. So we're fine with that. What we have in front of us is an environment that is unknown and in most cases very hostile. And the fact that we can add sound to things in space allows us to amplify the overall feel of the universe. If we wouldn't have the sound, it wouldn't be as exciting, at least for most people. And the ultimate goal is to make the sounds and music support and amplify the unknown and hostile environment. That is our main goal. When creating this, it's important to think about that we, as humans, know certain kinds of sounds in the world we live in at the moment. And we have to bring in some sounds into our sound designs that we recognize as, we recognize in our head that's something that we can relate to. For example, if you take a turret blast, we create those with our equipment and with our computers with some, sci-fi elements. But we then also have to take, a gunpowder and stuff and put into it in order to make you believe that it is actually a turret blast. So that's a big part of what we have to do. It's always a challenge to do this, but it's a lot of fun. The goal of the end product should make sure you, the player, actually believes that you are in the future and actually believes that you are shooting a turret. That is the goal. And yeah, you would not need to imagine where you are. You should feel it every time you shoot the turret. Designing these sounds is a challenge. In one sentence, it's a good sentence, I think. It's a challenge. So this image you see here, it's like we often think about the EVE universe, at least the sound department, as a huge painting, as the biggest piece of art there is in the world. At least how we see it often. And you know, it really is, isn't it? It's just like a huge Jackson Pollock painting, right? And it's very difficult to design for it because people are so subjective, and we have to cater to everyone's taste, and it's hard. But we have to, trust ourselves to make the, best thing we can do at each time. We have to create it interesting, but not so interesting as to take away from the whole. It has to be a part of the graphics. And, the sound and the graphics have to be in a marriage together and make this impact together. Because if we take too much from the graphics, which is actually extremely hard because it's so awesome, but it's, it has to be one thing that the people are experiencing. So designing sounds in such a way that they can exist on their own, as well as mixed with thousands of others. That's also a huge technical problem that we will go a little bit more into later. And another thing. So designing the sound is one thing, and in your computer and with your stuff. But then implementing it is another thing. That's like it's like 50% of the thing. 50% of the sound happens in real time inside the game. So it's impossible to design something and just, this is done. You have to put it in the game. You have to test it thoroughly with all kinds of situations, all kinds of other sounds going on, and then you should be good to go. We sometimes put sounds into the game, and we can't test every scenario with all other sounds and what's going on, maybe in a fleet fight or whatever. But sometimes we have to, fix the sounds afterwards. Not very often, but it happens. So during COVID times, we, obviously had to stay at home a lot, and well, we were isolated, like probably most of you, and lonely, kind of. So, staying at home alone with a computer and maybe a synthesizer or a controller or something was not enough for us. So what we decided to do, this is my home now, we decided to get some analog synthesizers and play with electricity directly. And this is Christian's. And it has changed the sound design a bit for us. It's more fun for us. I'm not sure if you've heard the change. Maybe wait 1 or 2 years, then you will hear more of it. But it has changed a little bit of the sound. It's a little bit warmer now, and we hope it's going to be a good thing for you to experience. And we will build the CCP studio in a similar way. So, talking about the music, the current Empire Space music has done a lot for everyone. It's you know, it has been great. I mean, by now it's almost iconic, you know, the in-space music. But it is linear. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. What we want to do, we want to make the experience more vertical. You know, you don't know what I'm talking about, but CCP Christian will explain later. So we want to, you know, we want to make the experience more in line with the sound effects and the graphics. Right now, this is just music inside the game, and what it is doing, it's playing its own thing, and then there's the graphics. You know, you could really just turn off the music like it is and play it from Spotify to do a similar thing, or same thing, or from a playlist inside the audio menu or whatever. So what we want to do is change it to be more interactive, for lack of a better word. We have started this. We actually started this in 2009 or 2010 maybe, with Zero Sec and Wormhole Sec. We put some like vertical, you know, music there. But it didn't have a beginning and an end or a middle. It has worked fine, and we're going to take that to the next level. So we are always exploring new tech to allow us to take the sound and the music further. And we are now exploring a technology that will allow us to create the sounds kind of while the game is happening. Not create them before on these guys and then sample them and put them in the game, but kind of create what notes to play, and then it's like, you know, it's like kind of MIDI, those of you who know that, but it's more than that. The sounds will be created by, for example, how you are flying and what ship you are flying and so on. And the sound will be altered, you know, depending on what you're doing and so on. But this is very much work in progress, and a lot of work is still to be, you know, is still to be done to finish this. But we hope for the best if we have time. But like I promised you, I promised we'd get back to the vertical aspect of music. And here is Christian Ross, CCP Christian.
Hello. Thank you. Can you can hear me, right? Yeah. Good to see you, and happy to see that everyone survived the pub crawl yesterday. You know. My name is Christian. I am an audio designer and a composer for EVEOnline. It's become sort of a passion of mine to try and find a voice, you could say, for the sort of the depth and the mystery of outer space, and do it through music. And as you mentioned, before I came to CCP, I was working at Aalborg University, and I was doing a PhD there about adaptive, vertically dominated music in outer space games. I'll explain what that means. And so I'm really excited to have this opportunity to sort of drag you with me into a rabbit hole of some of the philosophy that's behind the music, the new music that is coming into EVE and that is already in EVE. So this is music. Vertically dominated music is music which is continuous. It has a limitlessness to it. It's timeless, infinite. It's in a way incomprehensible. You can't control it. It's unknown. It's weightless, homeless, and it's unpredictable, not least. And so this is a very scary, sort of scary sounding example, but it can also be quite beautiful and wonderful, really. And it lends these properties to whatever it's coupled to. So if you couple it to being in outer space, on a small screen or whatever you have at home when you're playing, you can begin to give even something you're experiencing on a small screen, something infinite to it, like this, with this kind of music. So when I'm talking about vertical and horizontal, I'm talking about space-time, okay? It's like space-time, but it's not the kind of space that you know. It's not like 3D space. It's pitch space. So it's the space that pitches occupy. You can even call it spectral space, because then you're going not just the pitch of the note, but the note and how it sounds, and everything in between the 12 notes that we usually operate with in the Western world. And just as a demonstration, I'd like to play an example that demonstrates what happens as you move from the horizontal dimension of events that happen over time. And if you if you play a pulse that goes over time and you speed it up and speed it up and speed it up, something magical happens at one point. Many of you may know this, of course, is that it becomes one thing. Instead of being individual events, it becomes one vertical experience, the way that we experience it or perceive it. Okay, so the horizontal is structures happening over time. So then we're talking about rhythm and pulses and beats. Melody also. Melody happens a lot over time. It's dependent on being able to develop itself over the time dimension. Chord progressions, you can say the same. Any progression of chords needs obviously time as a significant component to how it lives, and so on. On the other hand, the vertical dimension, that is the sounding now. It's whatever is sounding in a sort of simultaneity. It's like simultaneously sounding now. And that has to do with pitches. It has to do with harmonies of simultaneously sounding pitches. Timbre, so the reason why a violin sounds differently from an oboe would be the timbre. And texture as well. And texture, you could explain it as sort of a micro variation within the sounding of the instrument. So that's like, a quick vibrato on a violin or something like that creates a certain texture. And that list goes on. That's a rabbit hole all on its own. You can, it sort of goes on infinitely if we try to describe the sound of the sounding now. Okay, so the point is coming. And the point is that if we have music that is dominated by the horizontal dimension in music, then it's dominated by rhythm, pulses, beats, and melodies and chord progressions, and how they sort of speak to themselves and refer back to themselves. So if it's like da 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 da, then there's definitely some, it's talking to itself in a way and imitating itself and repeating things. That all happens over time, right? And that's most music that we normally listen to. It works like that, like most music in the radio, most jazz and pop and reggae and techno and whatever is there. But if you then imagine music which is dominated more by the vertical dimension, then you get a very different kind of sonic experience. Then you have the sounding now as a most significant aspect of the music, and these things like horizontally dominated music and vertically dominated music, they're spanning over over sort of a scale, you could say. We're going to look at that later, but I'm going to play an example now. It's from 2001: A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick, he's been using this music a lot, this sort of style of music. And we're about to see these primordial apes wake up to find something just extraordinarily weird to them, like something they don't have the capabilities of comprehending what they're gonna experience. And just try and notice how the music is lending these properties of the continuous, limitless, timeless, chaotic, incomprehensible to this object. Here's another example later in the movie when they're far into space beyond Jupiter, and sort of reality becomes quite weird, interesting. Yeah, so the perception or the experience of music happens through, among other things, through our body. So we use the capabilities we have for understanding our own body, and also capabilities for language, and of course emotion when we listen to music. And I like to think about music as some form of communication, that it's coming from something or somewhere, not necessarily a composer, but it's like there's like an entity somewhere, abstract maybe, communicating to us, and we then receive this music, and that entity sending music, like vertically dominated music, is one strange foreign thing, and it lends those properties again to whatever it's coupled to. Here's another example.
In here, Mrs. Torrance, is where we keep all the dry goods and the canned goods. We got canned fruits and vegetables, canned fish and meats, hot and cold cereals, Post Toasters, corn flakes, sugar puffs, Rice Krispies, oatmeal, wheat, bean, and cream of wheat. You got a dozen jugs of black molasses. We got 60 boxes of dried milk, 30 12-pound bags of sugar. How'd you like some ice cream, Doctor? Sociable, angle rolls, and 7 kinds of what have you. Now we got dried peaches, dried apricots, dried raisins, and dried prunes.
And this is a good example of it's actually the music, and only the music, that is telling us that there is something completely unfathomable going on here. They can't show it, because how would you show it? But the music can do something like that. And so I just want to, I think I should maybe skip a few things here. I'm going a bit over time. But it has to do with musical anticipation. So I'm going to go through this very fast, and you're very welcome to contact me afterwards, and if you want to know more about this. So I'm gonna speed up a bit at the most complex part of the talk. Okay. So anyways, 3 ways of anticipating, predicting when you listen to music: past listening, future listening, and now listening. So past listening is happening all the time. So you try to predict the coming music based on what you just experienced. So based on your immediate past. So you listen to something, you hear patterns, and based on those patterns, you try to predict what's coming in constantly. And that's your immediate past with this piece of music, but it's also your whole your personal musical history. Every music that you ever heard, you use that, those maps that you have for that to kind of predict what's coming. So that's past listening. Future listening is when you would know the music, Like you know it so well, and I promise there's a point to this as well. So you know it so well that you actually are able to project the music that you know is coming into the future, and then it comes, and you're like, oh yeah, I knew that. That's a kind of a pleasant way, in a way. It's not very stressful. On the other end of the spectrum is something we could call now listening, and that has to do with vertically dominated music. This is where you have no idea what's coming. It happens when you don't know the music, and there's no way for you to predict what's coming, and so this sort of state of no patterns and no sense of control, in a way, pulls the rug under you continuously. And during this research, there was like a eureka moment at some point, because I've been working with this kind of linear scale from now listening and vertically dominated music and future listening and horizontally dominated music. At some point, I realized it's not a linear scale. They meet, because if you imagine music becoming so chaotic in a way that we actually, in our musical listening, we stop looking for patterns. Like the musical patterns just become so impossible that we just let it go. And at that point, you move from a quite stressful, somehow full of tension state of musical listening onto just something completely relaxed. And so there's a sort of wormhole between the two states of listening, and this model becomes a circle. And in this singularity that arises there, that's a singularity between time and space. So, but musical space. And it has to do with anticipation, and it also has to do with time scales. There's a fusing of as we experienced with this pulse that becomes a pitch. There's a fusing around this place where the vertically dominated music lives in the sounding now. Something fuses there in a sort of singularity where time sort of becomes space, you could say, in a way. But I won't go further into that. So, vertically dominated music has made its way into EVEOnline already, and I'm going to play a couple of examples. This is from Wormhole space. Skip forward here. And also the Triglavian invasion, we gave that some pretty dark music, which is also vertically dominated. As you might be able to hear, in this music here, there is actually a pulse. You have these that come in, and it even has an echo that goes blop, 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 and you can actually predict that. And that's kind of proving a point, which is that you don't need one or the other. You can find a way in between. And there it becomes really interesting, because it's a super powerful, as a composer, it's a very powerful thing to play with. How much do you want it to be over in this vertical end of the scale, and how much do you want it to have some structures that has a time aspect to them? And so that's something that is in EVEOnline already, and we'll be rolling it out more. For example, in the EVE NPE, the tutorial, we've been playing with this. So you would have some periods where you want this mystery to be the focus, but then the player's called to action might need to do some mining or kill someone. And there, just by adding a pulse, for example, you all of a sudden have, you have forward movement. It is in a few dungeons, but the plan is we'll be doing more of this, and it will be adaptive. So it's changing right now. The EVE tutorial is the most adaptive music that we have in EVE, and there will be more of this. So it will change with player actions and the scenario that the player is in to a much larger degree than it does at the moment. It will be in many more dungeons and in Empire Space as well, adaptive music. So Empire Space won't be this kind of very scary music. It might have vertically dominated aspects to it, but it won't be, it will be more of the wonderful kind. And this adaptive music that we're doing requires a expansion of our technical framework. And so I'm gonna leave you with this and give the mic over to Eric, and thanks for listening.
Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. I'm CCP Zoetrope. I'm the audio programmer on EVEOnline. I have the privilege of working with these two amazing sound designers to help them get their sounds in the game. I just wanted to talk a little bit. I'm going to cover the past very short, and then talk mostly about the present, and then give you a little bit of insight into the future. In the past 3 years, we've overhauled the ship engine sounds, and we've done a lot of work modernizing our internal tools to help them create faster, to be faster in getting their sounds in the game. We've been working on these adaptive music systems that Christian talked about, and we also modernized the hangar sounds. And we've been doing a lot of explorations into generative synthesis and composition in the game, which is not viewable yet. We're still doing a lot of explorations there. In addition to that, we just add a lot of the music and the effects that you hear from things that come out in the game. But let's focus on the present. I want to go back to what CCP Oldboy said with his wonderful sentence, designing sound environments is a challenge. And I want to go back to this picture. For the actual technical foundation of audio in EVE, this has been the biggest problem in EVE. You probably have noticed this when you turn off audio when you go into fleet fights because of the performance. Let's just cover a little bit of why that's so hard. When you look at a scene like this, you have thousands of ships, and you have to play all the important sounds without playing too many at once, without degrading performance too much, and you still have to maintain that great atmosphere that they build. There's a lot of popping. One of the hardest parts about our game is that the player, controls our camera, which means we have no idea where you'll be looking at any point in time. You could be zoomed out all the way. You could be looking at details of a ship. We can't really know where you're going to go. In other games, they have the opportunity of knowing that you'll go to this next level so we can load up these sounds. And then you're going to go to this next room so we can get these sounds ready. We don't have that. EVE has a lot of large looping sounds, and that's a challenge in and of itself. I can't really go over why. So currently we use a third-party audio engine named Wise, and we've been using their tools for a long time now. However, when it comes to limiting sounds in a scene that large, then it doesn't give us enough granularity of what sounds you should be hearing based on where you are or what's important. And looping sounds in particular, you have to take into account, you have to hold on to them so that when you return, the loop continues. It's different than if you had like a gunshot. We can just kill that if you're away. If there's a sound that's looping, you need to hear it when you come back. And Wise doesn't have a very good ability to do that. So in some cases, we're actually holding on to loops, the whole system. And when you're in a system, there's some minimal processing going on with jump gates and stations and moon and planets and suns, whether you know it or not. The configuration is really prone to human error, and there's a huge performance cost, like I said, which is most likely why you turn off audio when you're in a fleet fight. However, I am working on a fix. I'm calling it audio culling. Woo, yeah. It's currently being developed. The logic of what sounds are important is actually in our engine, and then we work in tandem with Wise. Right now with Wise, we can just say, we only want 30 ship engine sounds, and then we can't be smart about, like, never kill the player sound. So that's why sometimes you might hear some things just drop out when you're playing the game, especially in large scenes. Some sounds just don't play. Instead of talking about it, I'll just let you hear it. This is before audio culling. This is what you would get now. I spawned 100 ships and had them all shoot me. And then what you need to listen for is you're going to hear a lot of popping, and that's the audio engine is playing a sound, and then just like that. The audio engine is playing a sound, and then it decides to kill it immediately, so you get like a millisecond of sound. And you're going to notice that when you zoom in on something, you don't necessarily get the sound of the thing you're looking at. Right there, when I was zoomed up, you didn't even hear that shot, even though you were looking. So this is what it sounds like now. Keep in mind, a prototype. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's really clean already. So that's all happening on the engine side. They don't have to do anything to make that work. And the performance is already looking really good with that. So like usually if you were to zoom out while there's a fight, there's a lot of processing going on, whether or not you're there, like just a ton. But yeah, let's move on, because I don't have tons of time. Here's just a little glimpse into the future. Obviously, audio culling, we're going to release that. I'm not going to make any promises right now when. We're going to look into modernizing the turret audio. We already have the sounds, but audio culling was a problem. We couldn't put the new sounds in there. It's too expensive. We're going to redesign important module sounds, and as Christian mentioned, we're going to look into more adaptive Empire music, or Empire space music. And we'll continue to look into these generative synthesis and composition technologies to see if we can use them. But yeah, thank you so much. And now that we have all this gear set up, we're going to play out.
And also, we bought all these synthesizers. You know, there's no way we're not gonna bring them to the Fanfest. So